I originally was a sound engineer and worked in film and television, on TV and movies and films and so forth, but I started to develop a product a very long time ago in the world of Web.1, building an online directory for film and television professionals to help them find projects. I was lucky enough to go out and spend some time at Microsoft in the early days of the Microsoft network, started to really understand software development. I think it wasn't until I got to Telstra that I started to understand the world of hardware or the challenges of hardware.
Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. Joining me on the DevReady Podcast today, I have Adam Good. Adam, thanks for making the time to have a chat today.
No problem at all, Anthony. Pleasure to be here.
For those of you that don't know how I do this or are new to the podcast, I haven't actually met Adam before, so I know nothing about him. I'll let you take it away, Adam, because I don't want to wreck anything about your history and who you are and what you do.
I'm the co-founder, CEO of Auric. Auric is, in simple terms, a Wellbeing hardware reoccurring business model. We've created a scent intelligence platform using our first product, the Auric Aromasphere, that came about with the problem that we thought that scent was really the last programmable layer from human senses. So meaning we can control our lights and our sound and our temperature, but scent was something that wasn't programmable. And my co-founder, Alex Guthrie, and I went about trying to solve that. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay. What got you into this space? Or what was your background that sort of triggered you to go and start this venture?
I've been lucky enough to live in all sorts of different parts of the world, and I do try to have a wellness, program, I suppose. So I've always been, excited about yoga and meditation, and I've spent a lot of time living in countries like Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, Bali, and I've just found that scent was very prominent when it came into those sort of wellness environments. And I always sort of thought, once you've experienced that for 10 days on a wellness retreat and you sort of come home, it was always like, why can't I kind of create scent like you can in these more wellness environments, I suppose. And I just felt that scent was very much overlooked, and I started to think about that as a problem and wanted to really solve that. And really, the more I went down the rabbit warren of understanding scent and the olfactory system, I realized that it really is a really important part for connection into your brain and your memory and your emotion. And we started to look at how scent could help with your mood states, to use scent off the screen to support energy, calm, focus, and of course a good night's sleep. So that's been the journey we've been on.
Were you always an entrepreneur in your earlier career?
Not so much starting my own startups. I've certainly invested in a number over the years. I've been a chief digital officer by trade for the majority of my life. So what that means is I originally was a sound engineer and worked in film and television, on TV and movies and films and so forth. But I started to develop a product a very long time ago in the world of Web.1, building an online directory for film and television professionals to help them find projects and help them get onto movie sets or corporate videos or music videos. And so I started to learn a little bit about developing an always-on platform in those days. I was quite young back then, in my early 20s, building a FileMaker Pro and, Apple II computer connected to the Aussie Mail network back in the day. So I started to understand technology. Was lucky enough to go out and spend some time at Microsoft in the early days of the Microsoft network. Started to really understand software development. And then I went and did publishing at News Limited, so one of the early executive producers at News Interactive to put the newspapers online. So started to understand 24/7 publishing and web production. And then I went and had another sort of 10, 15-year career in advertising. I went to DDB and was part of the strategy department of DDB, and then into a digital agency called Tribal DDB that was quite successful, that took me around the world and based in Asia Pacific. And then did a stint at Telstra as well in the early days of building streaming television products and content off the early days of the 3G network. So yeah, I sometimes think about all the things I've done, but the last 3 years has been solidly building the Auric business.
There's a lot of variety there, and I can sort of see when you were in Southeast Asia, and that's probably when you went to those countries and had that experience in those wellness retreats. But yeah, I don't sort of see the connection, the through line to the hardware or focusing on that space. So it's interesting that you've taken that like left turn almost from that description.
Yeah, I think it wasn't until I got to Telstra that I started to understand the world of hardware, or the challenges of hardware. Probably been always more on the software layer of building customer experiences, and the marketing side of building, the front end of a interface, whether it was a web or a mobile interface, and what it takes to build up large audiences and bring them down into an event of value or into a moment of registration or a sale in e-commerce. But hardware, I became quite fascinated as you went to Telstra. While it's a networking company and building up great networks, at the end of the networks is usually a piece of hardware. So whether it was a handset and understanding how handsets connected to networks, and then obviously the content or the apps that went on top of that, or in the case of the early days of streaming television, sort of understanding, what it would take to build a new category for television. I was lucky enough to be in those early days of people didn't even know to connect a HDMI in the back of the television and you could get an experience. So those sort of learnings have certainly helped as you build something new.
A lot of behind the scenes things as well then, because you're setting up and breaking new frontiers at those times, which I'm sure probably opened a few eyes and let you understand how you should approach your solution for Auric. Because hardware and software together, I think it's harder to get the hardware right. Because software you can iterate quickly.
I mean, my last executive job was at WPP, where I was, managing some of the SaaS relationships with WPP. They have a very big, large media relationship, of course, with Google and the Metas. But then more and more clients were starting to take SaaS products, so build a e-commerce platform using Salesforce or Adobe platforms or Optimizely. So I really started to see that world where it wasn't just sort of build the software from scratch. It was obviously taking a SaaS application and then customizing it. So I'm very comfortable in the software layer. But I was seeing, 2 or 3 years ago that the software layer was speeding up quite fast, meaning that if you're in the software business, and you are, Anthony, that whole world of time and materials and scoping out a project and determining how you would build that to a client, I saw that really reducing as an offering. And I started to really think I really wanted to tackle something really challenging, really, really meaty problem. So, hey, why don't we program Scent? How hard can that be? Which ultimately means you have to have a hardware solution at the end of that to, in our case, disseminate aromas into particles so they can move around a room space. So, but I generally felt about 3 years ago you really needed to tackle something really difficult because the software layer was going to become maybe a little bit, easier to do. And I found that now. I mean, my co-founder is a robotics engineer, hardware expert, and we're both sort of more low-code software users, but our software roadmap is probably 2 years ahead of where we thought we'd be at about this point in time. Using, biometric insights to personalize scent was really just a conceived concept, but we've been able to build quite quickly on the software layer. But ultimately, you can't deliver the solution until you crack the hardware side, which is very, very time consuming. And to be honest, we probably underestimated the challenge of that. Maybe we didn't, but it's certainly taken longer to get hardware right. Yeah.
You're beyond a normal hardware device because you're mechanical. You've got parts that move, which probably complicate it exponentially, because that's another failure point. Most hardware it's a device, it's electronic, it's a board in the case with a battery and some chips and memory, and then maybe a screen or some other way to interact with it. As soon as very limited in the space, my understanding is here. Once you go mechanical, changes the whole conversation. And then it's hard to prototype. You can probably 3D print things quickly, but then if you want to test end to end the whole thing, at least you've got rapid prototyping now compared to not having it years ago.
It is a really challenging project. What could possibly go wrong using oil and electronics and chips and hardware? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? But it has been a real challenge to get the product working. There's been so many variations. I mean, our 8 therapeutic oils, even the oils themselves have a slightly different viscosity of every single oil, which means that every single oil gets drawn into the solution slightly different. A peppermint to a ylang-ylang, or to a bergamot to a lavender. So those sorts of things were really quite challenging. But the iteration side of it, the faster part of hardware is that you can update the firmware so much quicker than what you were be able to. My days back in Telstra, back in 10, 12 years ago, you would build a piece of hardware and it was very difficult to upload, to update the firmware through a cloud kind of update, or you'd get to a point where the hardware wasn't useful anymore. You'd literally have to decommission the hardware and start again. So but it is challenging because, all the various moving parts in the hardware, you've only got to have one component you haven't really cracked. It ultimately means the whole thing is, not really able to go to market successfully. We were a very strange business when investors were looking at Auric. You want to build scent intelligence, a programmable layer of scent. That seems quite strange. But we're actually a little bit more interesting to look at these days because you've created a lot of moats along the way, a lot of patents, a lot of componentry that is very difficult to reproduce very, very quickly. I think hardware is becoming more and more, in Australia it was very dismissed. You'd be lucky to find 4 investors out of 100 that would do hardware even 2 years ago. But now you'd probably find 50-50. You'd find investors that are very open to hardware. And really, at the end of the day, hardware is everything. When you think about the amount of data centers and infrastructure that needs to get built now.
It's probably harder to get competitors because then they have to actually manufacture a device. There's a larger upfront cost, more R&D time. Software's anyone can build it anywhere and put it on the cloud and it's available. So it's more of a differentiation, probably another barrier to say, all right, like you said, you've got a moat in your space. Your probably challenge is educating people about the product and the benefit rather than just the marketing side of here's something new to use.
We've had to sort of educate a new category too. While we're in this sort of well-being, wellness sort of space using scent to support mood, we talk about it as a category called mood as a service because at the end of the day, it's the output is scent helping you move from one state to another state and tracking that change. And then we've also sort of worked out over the last couple of years that we're building infrastructure as well. So we talk about scent intelligence as an infrastructure layer, both in a enterprise level as well as in the home. So there's a lot. It is a challenging project. You're building an IoT. You've got a software layer. You've got a tool. You've got to tool your product. You've
even got a product and supply chain.
You've got to ship physical oils to the end destination for replenishments every 45 to 60 days. So there's lots of moving parts. But as you step back and you start to ultimately build all that with software, you start to build up something that is, hopefully got plenty of value as we keep going forward with it.
Have you found the biggest challenge being that people don't understand how powerful the aromas are? Because I know at a really simple level, like a lot of your taste comes from the smell of food. And it's very powerful. As soon as you smell something, you get like nostalgia. You can get taken back to a specific moment. That's the key trigger for things. So I understand how we can put you back in the mood, because then certain smells are more calming than others, and everyone knows when there's a putrid smell. And that's how we know when things are off in food. They make a bad aroma.
Yeah, and it's such a personal thing, scent. I mean, here we are on a podcast, and no matter how much I get my product out of the box and play it here, you can't experience it right now. You can't. So you've really got to get these products into the hands of somebody to experience what the scent is about. But even once you get that, it's very personalised. And we use the analogy sometimes that Auric is the elegance of e-soap, so that beautiful e-soap kind of fragrances that they have. The functionality of a product like Sonos speakers, you can control them, you can move, plug and play speakers into various different spaces, similar to what the Aromasphere does. And then the simplicity of a product like Nespresso, so the repeatable kind of business of that. And when people start thinking about those three different brands, that's ultimately what we've got to try to educate an investor or a customer with. So you get the Aromasphere, and it's all very exciting. You plug your oils in and you're pressing buttons and you're creating these aromas. But ultimately, it's like getting the Nespresso coffee machine and making yourself 10 cups of coffee. It's probably not what you need right now, 10 cups of coffee, but you just want to find your cup of coffee, like what's my short black or my milky coffee that I like. And once people start to find those aromas that work for them, and it's all about scheduling them at different points of the day, or really our innovation is using things like wearables, using the biometric data to help people schedule when they think when an aroma could help uplift in an energy sense, or down-regulate for calm or for sleep. And so that's a whole new world category, which takes a little bit of time, and including the end users. But the good news is we think we've got a good product now, and after a sort of about 10 days of using the product, it's the Pavlov's dog kind of situation. How did I ever wake up without having a beautiful aroma to wake up to, or how did I go to sleep without a beautiful aroma to go to sleep to, or how I have my mates around to watch the footy and I got some aromas, or a dinner party or a date night, whatever it is. We're just creating those various different moments. And so it is a really beautiful product when you get people excited about using it. So, but yeah, there's been a lot of work behind building a product like that, and conceiving that is, and we're still going.
And there's probably lots of opportunity moving into the future too. With just off the top of my head, there's the 4D movies in cinemas, and there's some approach to that in the home. I'm assuming any sort of cooking channel or network or YouTuber, if there's some way they can integrate that while you're watching, and then that's going to get you more excited about the recipe, and that's longer term, harder things probably to achieve.
Well, there's people doing it actually. There's scent with gaming. People have gaming and they'll have their screeching car brake sounds, smells and explosions and various different things. I think smell-o-vision was a concept way back in the 1950s.
Yeah, but that was like something that was like in your nose, I think, from memory, or like some headset as well.
Yeah, the way you create aromas, there's businesses that are creating synthetic aromas. It's a whole industry. I mean, obviously the fragrance industry, it's a $3 trillion industry in creating aromas for various different things. You get a brand new set of Nike sneakers and they just smell differently to a set of sneakers that have been been used for a few weeks. I mean, the smell of the new car, why do we feel anxious when we go to hospitals and smell those sort of hospital smells? It's an incredible part of our humanity, of how the importance of scent. And we're really only just touching the surface of this whole olfactory system that we found during COVID, that if you lose your sense of smell, which a lot of people did when they had bad cases of COVID that had all sorts of other conditions on your physiological self. You know, it's not a good thing if you lose your sense of smell. People think, I'd rather lose my sense of smell than lose my sight or my hearing. I mean, there's a lot of research to suggest that's maybe just as bad.
Yeah, well, food doesn't taste like anything if you lose your sense of smell. In building the hardware, has there been any part that's been a bit more difficult than the other, simply because you've got the mechanical, you've got the oils, you've got the IoT part? In my mind, something to do with the atomizer and the mixtures, probably, but I haven't lived it.
Yeah, look, we've had so many challenges with the hardware side, and I think the biggest challenge with hardware is that you really do get the assumptions out of whack. You're going to be at a particular level of the hardware at a particular time, and you usually kind of don't estimate that very well at all, to be honest. But I think in our case, we've had particularly challenging side of things. We've had two sides of it. One side is the oils themselves that has an innovation in the smart capping solution with an RFID tagging. So not only do we have to have a whole new capping solution of how we drew the oils out of the bottle, track the usage, but then the clipping device was simple enough that you could plug in a bottle of lavender, knew the bottle of lavender, where did the lavender come from, and then track that usage. And of course, if you pull it out and you wanted to fill it up with your own oils, that we stop all of those scenarios. So that sort of whole solution, while was a really big innovation and delivery path, it was all the other components that had to go with it. You know, get TGA approval for your capping, the GMP production process of getting the oils. You know, bringing that whole manufacturing solution to market took longer than we thought, and then the hardware for the aromasphere, getting that right. So the way that hardware works is you've got to make a certain amount of prototypes and get all the CAD files and get all the information to go to the tooling company to build the tool that makes the tool, and then you've got to continue to get articles off that machine to completely hone them so you've got a finalised product. So yeah, it took longer than we thought, and it's very capital intensive. So you're always got to have some pretty good investors that you can go back and say, well, we thought we were going to be at this stage at this point in time, and we need a little bit more money to kind of keep going. So, I think it's, hugely, we spent a lot of time in the US last year, and we could see US trying to bring back manufacturing from China into America, and realizing how much of a major undertaking that is to bring that kind of process back on shore.
There's a lot of knowledge that's lost, that if you kept it there, then that domain or the industry knowledge continues to grow upon itself. Now it's either you're going to bring in experts from somewhere else. Remember, at one point there was Honda engineers had to come in to Honda in America and support the factory getting rebuilt there so they could sell the cars.
Yeah. Look, it's incredible what China is manufacturing. They're really great partners. They're very talented engineers and designers. So, but they're a long way away. So every time something comes off the tool, it's obviously got to travel to Australia. We've got to test it. We've been assembling onshore, so we still haven't. We're not big enough to not do the assembly onshore at the moment, but eventually, when we get our order numbers continue to grow, we'll offshore that as well. So that means everything would be done in Australia except for the oil production, which will remain here.
Having the complete end-to-end business, because your software, hardware, product is probably a different challenge than most people we've had on the podcast, where they're either building a system or they've got an electronic device that supports the software. You've got 3 different businesses there effectively, or different units in the one business, and they all have to work properly to make the whole solution work.
They do. There's lots of challenging parts to that. Yeah, we're a physical product in the physical world doing ambient computing, but then we've still got to have a physical product to go into that environment for replenishment. So yes, there's a lot. Yeah, we are building lots of different businesses all in one. One thing that we are very proud of, and actually we think is a differentiation, is that when you're building a physical product and getting physical items into the real world, I mean, we're still only at 2 full-time staff and 10 fractional staff. So I don't think you could have done that before agents, meaning that the automation process of every single aromosphere that's on our network is a completely different profile to every single person. So what each one is doing is something different, but then you have to extrapolate out, well, that device is now settled down, meaning they've got a morning routine or an afternoon routine, and we know exactly which oils that we need to upsell, downsell as the process goes on. And so that is all automated. That's all agents, understanding the profile of the usage, sending little alerts to the app or, outbound email campaigns to suggest how the replenishment will work. Of course, if there's devices that are inactive, there are all sorts of different steps to that. So I think you can build $100 million revenue market literally with 5 people.
It's amazing when you say that.
Yeah, I don't think we could have done that, even 10 years ago.
AI has accelerated everything. It's allowing people to do a lot more, spend less time doing lower value things or things that were like a lot of copy and paste work or low value just data checking and monitoring. We can use that now in agents to collate stuff. Yes, people say they still be wrong, but from experience, most of the time in what I've seen recently, they're wrong very, very little. There's not as much of a hallucination problem that people are worrying about.
Yeah, no, it's just exciting on the software layer. As I said, we're always a little bit further behind in some of the physical things that we need to do, but the software layer, we're just ahead. I mean, to be able to, send Claude off to develop some software overnight, and then to get not only a working prototype, but on our dev servers, a whole new UI interface that we can then trial. We can test that. We can test that with the hardware, and then go, wow, that product feature is working quite well. Move it to stage, test a bit more, and then move it to live. And that's just all been managed through Alex, who's the CTO of the company, being able to just set those agents off to develop that prototype. And I mean, that's just changed our whole structure of our team. Like we had dedicated people for mobile, for UX, for all of those scenarios, and some of their time has been reduced quite heavily so yeah, I mean, I've got lots of friends in the startup world, and I'm very thankful now to be a hardware company than just a software company. Like, I feel like that is going to be...
You got a bit of a barrier there.
A worthy cause. So, yeah, I mean, and I can legitimately say to our investor cycle that we can get to $100 million with five people. As we move into different markets, I think you're going to have a representative in every market, but ultimately the automation layer is pretty special. So when people say, "Are you a hardware company?" I think we are, but I mean, the software layer I'm very, very impressed with. So it's 50-50.
Well, the software drives everything. The hardware is how it's delivered, and the end product is the experience.
Absolutely.
Have you had challenges? So you started 3 years ago, which is just when the AI was starting. Was it challenging prior to the AI coding tools, which has been about 18 months now, to get everything working and integrated properly? Because I know there are challenges when you're working with hardware and software and the firmware on the hardware.
I always tried to approach Auric as a software entity, meaning every time we put a piece of, a 3D printed, kind of in the early days, a very Frankenstein kind of aroma product at the end of the network that was disseminating oils, I was very interested just to keep adding new pieces of hardware. And I think when I was working with hardware engineers, it was a bit more like, no, that's an unusual way to work. Like, you wanted to be live as well as with product going onto the network at the same time. And I just felt that my experience, what I had when we were at Telstra and we're building kind of, Telstra TV and those sort of things, that was when you knew really quickly with customers using even if it was a really basic kind of piece of hardware at the end of it. So I think So in those initial days, yes, there was no real AI being kind of built. It was all low-coded software. We used, Xano as a low-coded database, Webflow for websites. We still have a fair bit of low-code software in our stack now. But as you start to build more units onto the network, you've got to get that low-code out of the way and start building more custom solutions on on the cloud. So the AI software development has really, the wellness algorithm, the research we had on scent therapy to build out what the blends were consisting of was always AI, but the software layer now to the completed. It's a completed stack. It's a live stack, but it's all been done with AI development now. So we have reduced the need for software engineers to be cutting code. We're letting Claude or Codex do that at the moment, and we haven't really found any limitations.
It's hard to have a limitation because most software, if you're building an app, is generally the same sort of functionality across every app. It's just got a different look or a different data you're capturing. What I've found, the way I've described it, is the code was never the hard part, writing code. That was just the person who could speak that language could write it. The hard part is always designing it and building it the right way so it can scale and support what you're trying to do. If you don't design it right, it doesn't matter how good you write the code, it's going to be crap. And that's always the challenge. And you would have experienced that in your career. Unless it's planned up front, you know what you're trying to do and everyone's on the same page, it's going to end up being a disaster at the end. And then even more of a disaster with the hardware.
Yes, exactly. We've rebuilt a number of components of the software layer in the last 2 years, I think.
And because you can quickly and iterate.
I think you can. I think everybody's rebuilding their stack at the moment. I don't think anybody is not doing that. I always say this to Alex, you try to say, like, you're in this big problem of the day, and you've just got to kind of remind yourself, hey, let's just think back to what was our biggest problem we had 12 months ago or 6 months ago. And it's got nothing to do with the problem that you're on right now. And so you've just got to kind of embrace the problem that you have right this moment and just really lean into it and not... Yes, you want to get rid of it, but at the same time, it's not as though there's another one that's just around the corner that you haven't seen yet that's going to rear its head and now need to work through it. So you've got to kind of somehow embrace the problem of the day and somehow find the energy around it. Do your best. That you've got history with software development and problems, and you've got to work out how we're going to get through this one out the other side. So my biggest difference, and you would have this too, Anthony, is just team sizes. It's just so much smaller now. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the days when the iOS team was over there and the Android team was over there and the web team was somewhere else. And
they're all isolated doing one thing only.
Yeah, and you just walk around cubicles and desks and ask people, so what are you working on today? And, just try to get an understanding of what everybody was doing. Those team structures are really quite different now. But I don't know. I mean, I'm asking you a question now. I mean, the collaboration of, say, 3 or 4 people on an AI kind of development stream, I still think that that's still something that we've not cracked yet. Like, I think we can get 2 people on an AI development stream quite well. But as it gets beyond that too, it's almost like everyone's tripping over themselves a little bit trying to work out how to do that.
We end up with teams of 8 to 10 on projects, but they're 3 different facets to a product. Yeah, so there's an app, a mobile web, and an API. So there's 2 to 3 people on each one. So we've been able to work on that and have all 3 running concurrently and working and accelerating. But we're a very documentation-heavy business and plan everything up front. The DevReady, the name of the podcast, is to get the people development ready. And that process is all about getting the spec and the design right up front. And it's all documented before anyone starts. So there's no running over each other because they're all working towards the same contract as the API. Like, this is what you're going to get on the web, this is what you're going to get on the mobile, and this is what the server will give you. So everyone's talking the same language and knows what they have to do.
Yeah, right.
And that's us over years of iterating in software how to get a process better.
Yeah, no, I know. I've watched a few of your guests in your podcast. I mean, you're really DevOps background, and I think that they're the geniuses of the world now, right?
Yeah, I'm a bit of everything background, really.
Yeah, right. Okay, got plenty of scars. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a computer science games tech at La Trobe. Then we moved into the business in my final year of uni. So if you hadn't heard that from one of the episodes, and then from development up to whatever you name I've done in the business.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, very successful business it is. So congrats.
So it's a bit more unique than a normal developer, I would say, just because I've had the experience of running the business and stepping in every seat.
Yeah. Well, that's what you want. I mean, I think the people that have been around a long time and seeing various different different stages of tech development are still very, very useful. I'm a little bit of an older founder. I mean, being 56 and my co-founder's 30. It's quite what I've experienced in technology development. He just hasn't done. Like, he wasn't old enough to be through that process.
Yeah, he's known the iPhone to be in existence forever, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, we started, it was 2008. iPhone 2 had just come out, and it was web apps. There was no app store. People were moving off the Samsung Windows phones and Blackberries with keyboards.
Yeah, no, I've done all of that. I've done. It's sometimes hard to sort of talk about your background on what you've built and what you've been part of. It's just crazy, really. It's quite a long list. So, yeah.
Just before we wrap up, any advice for anyone out there thinking about tackling hardware and trying to bring a product to market?
Well, look, I think you can only do it once, maybe. I mean, I think, then maybe this is kind of it. I mean, I was at an enterprise company that had a lot of capital in Telstra to build hardware back in the day. So that's probably, you don't have that as a startup. You're running on oily rags all the time. But look, it's very satisfying to have a real tactile, something unique that you've conceived. So I think you've got to be very organized to be a hardware founder. You've got to be very clear on what minimal viable products kind of looking like. What are you really trying to unearth in those early days as a proof of concept that will make you want to keep continuing to build features? Look, it's not for the faint-hearted. I think Auric's my life work. If we run out of money or something goes wrong, well, so be it. But I don't know whether I'd be rushing to another hardware piece. But I do like hardware founders. I mean, you can't help it.
It's good to have something tangible.
If you get it right, they're just so interesting. I mean, if you love the Jobs and Wozniak story of Apple in the garage building hardware, or the early Apples, or we're seeing $1 trillion company in SpaceX being built. There's 25 years of building rockets. They're really big, meaty kind of challenges, and I think they're a bit interesting. I was in New York last week, week before, for the New York Tech Week, and I went to a lot of different sort of demos, and a lot of people just pitching their ideas. And it, being a little bit older, it just really reminded me of the early .com days when people were building early things in the internet. This is where we are with AI. I think there's a lot of people that are building a lot of AI slop and a real lot of fast, things because you kind of can. And the good thing about hardware is you can't really build slop because it quickly is slop. What I mean is that you've assembled something in a 3D printer and it's just a bit of rubbish.
The iteration time in the cycles are much faster. So you can get through the bad things quickly, hopefully, and get the right thing faster. Obviously,
a challenging time to be building in Australia with some of the budget changes. The R&D tax grant is good if you've got some good partners to help you with the navigation of how to put your submissions in for R&D. I don't think you can do R&D on software anymore, like solely.
Unless you have something very unique and there's a lot of R&D to it, it's hard.
I think the definition is going to be really, it's really tightening up. R&D tax incentives are really tightening up. So hardware is a genuine a genuine thesis, that this is what we want to research and develop. This is the project. This is the hypothesis that we want to, test out, and we're going to build towards that. And it's never been built before, hence why we're researching and studying and learning, and hence why the grant should help with that. So if you can get good partners around R&D, then building hardware, you can have a little bit of your money spent come back to continue to develop. But yeah, you've just you've got to be really passionate about what you're doing in the hardware space. You've got to really find something that you think is missing in the world and kind of go after it. But I think we probably haven't seen the killer AI hardware app, hardware solution yet. I think hardware is going to be a really big part of the next iteration on top of these large language models. So there's going to be some pretty interesting ambient computing, IoT plays going to be happening. I think people should consider hardware. I think be a crazy founder in the hardware space. Look me up. There's plenty of good therapy groups that everybody's coming together to give everybody the warm hugs you need to keep going. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you need the support. You need the people who've gone through the trenches to give you some help, and hopefully you can help avoid a mistake that someone else has made. And that was the whole point of starting this podcast as well. Share the stories like yours. People can learn from those mistakes and hopefully just accelerate a little bit faster.
Yeah, no, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Adam, for your time today.
Yeah, cool. Bye-bye.